I've padded the canvases and I'm just going to do a brief evaluation with you. So what I've done is I've taken the bastings out that held the domet in place, which were my white bastings. And I've also taken the bastings out that basted the horsehair to the canvas, which were my red bastings in the videos, if you remember. Now I basted with a different color like red or anything that would contrast against the canvas, so that by the time I'm done with my padding, I can remove those bastings and I can see them well. If I would use white basting or anything that's close to this tone, it may be difficult to see them sometimes if you've taken a small bite. So that's why the color red was used there, so I could see it and take it out quickly. Now, as a recap, what I want you to keep in mind is that when you cut your canvases, there are areas that you're going to leave inlay, and those areas may change. So you never know whether that area is going to be within the used area or it's going to be cut away and it's going to be trimmed back. What you don't want to do is to pad the entire thing just to make it look nice. Although if you want to practice, feel free to do so. But when you're trying to be efficient, you have to know where you should put your stitches and where you shouldn't. Take away time from anything that's unnecessary and put it in anything that's crucial. That's the mindset. So shoulder inlay, we don't know. I mean, I do know with this jacket, but if you're making this for yourself or a customer, you may drop the fronts, or you may pick up the fronts, or change the shoulder angle, or change the position of the neck point and all of that. So as for now, I haven't been padding the shoulder inlay on both of them, exactly the same. I haven't been padding the area around the armhole. We left about 3/4 to an inch above the base of the armhole of the jacket, which is here. So I'm not padding these areas. But what I have padded is the area that is going to be covering the horsehair and is going to be against the body, and that's the bottom, because this is not going to change. So every stitch that I've done goes over the edge of the domet. Another thing that I mentioned in the previous video is that there is going to be a bridle, which is a cotton tape, over the break line. This has a certain width. Some people put on a very wide bridle, some people put on a very narrow bridle. Now, there is a difference in putting on a wide or a narrow bridle. The entire purpose of a bridle is that the break line, which is slightly on the bias or off the straight grain, is flexible and can stretch out. You can see this is very flexible compared to this. This doesn't, give. And so that bridle is there to control the break line and prevent it from stretching. However, you can also use the bridle to draw in this area and give the chest a little bit more shape. So, since we're going to have a bridle that's about 1 inch on our break line, there is no need to pad this area that's behind the break line, because a bridle will cover this emptiness, and then we're going to pad our lapel on top of the bridle. So anything that you see here, first of all, will get trimmed back to about 3/8 behind the break line, except for the domet. The domet is going to be trimmed right on the break line, and the horsehair is going to be trimmed 3/8 behind the break line. And then a bridle is going to be put on top of that. So there's no need to pad all of this. Having said that, the next stage for us is going to be cutting out the darts. This is where things get fun. I mean, they are fun already, but it gets even more fun, because now you can put shape into your canvas and sculpt what vision you have in your mind and make that a reality. However, there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. Although you can just put, darts wherever you want, you have to understand anatomy to make this the best you can. Because if you don't understand the shapes and the proportions of the human body, you're going to end up putting random darts in areas, and they're not really going to correlate with the shape of the body. Sometimes we use canvases to hide the shape of the body. So maybe we intentionally do something that is not exactly happening on the body. So we give a different illusion and we flatter the body, or we hide, something that we don't want to show. But the majority of the times, whatever shape you put in has to correlate with the body, because the body has a certain way of moving around, and also the majority of darts that you're going to put in are there to control certain areas where surplus is created, like I explained in the dart videos. Now, we have here the basic model and the pagoda model. Both of them are going to have the exact same dart. It's going to be one dart that we have on the forepart as well. That's our chest dart. And we also are going to have a dart that goes into the front side. Now, I'm going to explain to you exactly why we are putting that. There is one difference with this chest dart that you have to keep in mind, is that on the forepart, this chest dart runs, it starts from nothing, goes into 1/2 inch in total, quarter either side, and then runs down parallel to one another, and then finishes at a pocket cut. Now, we don't do this on the canvas. What we do is we create a cut in the middle of the dart where the widest point is, where it goes from 0 to 2/4 at either side. And that's where we take this dart out. We don't take the dart out as, one shape, just the dart, and leave everything else intact, because the dart that we have on our forepart ends in a cut, literally a cut in the material. And when you close the dart, these two materials move and shift alongside each other. It's not one material that, is taken out and it creates, some shape here and it goes into nothing. The reason why we have a dart like that is that a basic, normal, everyday jacket for a lady and a man, or a man or a woman, girl, boy, doesn't matter. A basic jacket, single-breasted jacket or double-breasted jacket, doesn't have a lot of shape around the hip area. When you look at some of the couture pieces that, Dior, Chanel, Balenciaga, and some of those famous couture houses create, they have very distinct shapes when it comes to the waist and the hips. It's very exaggerated. We don't have that. All we need is for this front part to wrap around the body as if it would wrap around the cylinder. Therefore, by taking a dart that goes from nothing to something to nothing again, we create room, but we don't fill it out. And unless we don't fill it out, it's technically wrong to have that dart. So what do? We take out a dart that starts from 0, goes to, let's say, whatever either side, and then runs parallel down, and then ends in a cut, an actual cut. So by the time we take the dart out, these two parts can move freely. And what happens is that this side of the garment moves forward, but the eventual effect, the final effect, is as if there has never been a dart here. It just remains flat. However, when it does go over the body, it wraps around the body like a cylinder. Don't worry if you're not following. I will explain this to you once we get the jacket together. But you should probably be following this. Now, why don't we now, after I've explained this, take this dart all the way and make a cut here? Well, there is no need to do that. The higher we bring this, first of all, we make that cut in the waist. This is exactly where the waist point for us is. When we make that cut here, since on the forepart, this eventually ends up as a flat panel, we might as well leave this part alone so that we can, attach our pockets to the canvas and do all the things we have to do there. And just make a cut in the waist so that once we take the dart out, we can then give enough wiggle room for the waist to wrap around the body without creating a tightness, because your suppression, when the dart is taken out, is created by having this surplus around here. And this surplus, when wrapped around the body, will straighten out. And when it straightens out, this is what happens. This straightens out, and like so, and the chest is pulled forward. Okay? So keep that in mind. I will explain this one more time as we go through the canvassing parts and when we reviewed on a mannequin, but I thought I'd just explain this to you. So, before we put the darts in, what we want to make sure of is to shrink the canvas as much as we can. This is shrunk already once. Before we put the horsehair on, this was shrunk again. And now before I take the darts out, I wet this one more time. Why do I do that? Because once you take out the darts and you machine them up, you don't want the canvases to distort anymore. So you take all the distortion that you can out of your canvas so that by the time you're done, it's as smooth as you can manage. Because like I said, when these yarns are spun and the yarns are aligned and woven, there is a lot of tension on them. When you wet them, you kind of give them a shock and they contract again into their natural forms. And you want to make sure they contract as much as possible so that they don't contract anymore. Now let's make this wet and talk about the darts. Now, I'm not sure whether this is visible to you or not, but when I spray the water on top, I can see the whole thing contract. So wool canvas contracts less, it shrinks less, but linen does shrink quite a lot. Now, I'm just going to go with some, with the iron over it. If you have time, allow it to, dry and, take all the water in. But as we want to get on with the video, I'll just try to speed up this process for you. Another thing that I wouldn't advise is to leave your iron on for a very long time until one patch has dried and then move on to the other. Because what will happen is that all the starch in the linen is just going to stick to your canvas, and when you lift it up, you'll feel that things are now stuck to it. So always keep your iron moving. Make a habit out of it, because you don't want to leave your iron on one point too much. If it becomes a habit, you may do that on the fabric and then you have some smoked fabric, which may be nice if you're working on a roasted coffee bean jacket, but not really ideal if it's a cream linen or whatever. Now, when it comes to the canvases, I am not getting involved in any type of shaping with the iron, because shaping with the iron is extremely dangerous. It's good for certain things. It's good for, trousers if you just want to make them look good for 10 minutes and take a photo. But anything that you're going to stretch, unless it's secured down with stitching, is going to contract back at some point. Although stretching contracts, or kind of like goes back to its original shape less than compressing, I would still advise to minimize your shaping with the iron. I mean, some parts are going to be inevitable, and you have to shape them so that they don't want to go back to their original shape. But when it comes to shrinking and stretching areas that are high risk, then don't do it. To just make sure the shape is there by the cutting and by the correct engineering of your canvases. Take it easy. So please keep that in mind. You see some of you are going through old tailoring books, which I know very well, and you see a lot of photos, people stretching things, and they're like pulling and doing all of that, and you're like, wow, this is really the art of tailoring. And it's not. There are methods that work and there are methods that are very experimental. If you're clever with your engineering, you use the combination of all techniques to create a shape, not just the principle of one technique and just try to shape an entire jacket with the iron. So make sure you balance things out. Now, another thing that I want you to remember is that making something wet is very different than putting steam on it. Steam is not going to really shrink this the fibers. It's the wetting that, you know, puts them in a state of shock and makes them contract. So if you think, oh, I'm just going to put some steam over it and it's going to be fine, it isn't. You have to make sure it's wet, or just shrink your canvases like 2 or 3 times before you actually start cutting anything. But that's going to take a lot of time, so you might as well do it as you go, and make sure you take out all the tension and pressure that's on the yarns and on the fibers. Let me just highlight something to you for a second. If I would just put this on the side and bring this here and get you to focus on this canvas. So, as you know, our armhole is going to be somewhere around here, which I'm going to mark for a second. So let's say, let me just use chalk, that's probably easier. I'm just going to use some red chalk, which you shouldn't do this, but red chalk is just for the illustration purpose. So the armhole of the jacket is going to be roughly in this area, okay? And the shoulder is going to be roughly in this area. Now, when I said you have to understand anatomy to be able to make correct judgments, if you take the average body, let's say, we have the neck, we have your trapezius muscle. I mean, I'm going to do an exaggeration. And then we have your chest, we have your rib cage, and we have your belly button, and this is the center of your body. And it's going to go something like that, okay? And these are your ribs here. And this is, well, you know what this is. What we then have is we have this deltoid, and then we have the triceps and the biceps on top. Very masculine figure, goes to the gym, and then we have the rest of the arm, okay? Now, your canvas, your body canvas, and I don't really have a different color chalk that I could use, and I don't want to use red chalk on my board because it's just going to stay there. Your canvas is going to be roughly in this area. So, oh well, whatever. Your canvas is going to be in this area here. It's going to go most of the time, okay, let me one more time. Your canvas is going to go over this body, okay? This is going to be the break line, more likely, like so. And it's going to fall down. You're going to have the front edge. And you have, the cut here, which is this cut. You have the dart there, like so. And this is going to just fall down over the body, like that. And you have your canvas on the side seam right here. I hope this is clear on the video, because I am not seeing what I'm filming. Now, one thing you have to understand is that the armhole usually sits on top of the deltoid, partially. Very rarely do we cut our armholes so that it really is only on the chest and that the entire deltoid is in the sleeve. Because if you would do that, you would have a very small and narrow cross chest, and your sleeve has to then look very wide from the front, and it's not gonna, so basically your sleeve is not gonna look like, something like this. It's gonna look something like, more like this, and that's just a bit bizarre. So therefore, the armhole usually extends over the chest, and this is our chest here, and kind of like sits just over the chest on top of the deltoid, something like this, okay? Now, why am I saying this? Well, the reason why I'm saying this is that we have one dart here. We know what this dart is going to do. This dart is going to be very simple. It basically is a quarter here. I mean, this could be 3/8 or whatever. It depends on what your pattern is saying. It's going to be a quarter this side, and this is simply going to connect to the point of the dart, the apex of the dart, and that's it. That's our dart. Simple. We're going to make a cut into here. Whoops, sorry, that was not a nice line. We're going to make a cut into here, chop this triangle out, and we have our dart once we close it. The other dart, which is going to be the dart that goes into the side, is slightly different. That dart, traditionally, if you look at all the old books, goes into a shape like this. It basically starts from here, goes into the tip or the apex of the chest dart, and then again we take another extra amount and then run that into nothing. That's going to be the dart. However, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this dart makes perfect sense when you do this. When you do this and you say, well, look, there is a surplus, so we have to take the surplus out. Don't be fooled, my friend, because this is a flat board. You've just created shape on a flat board. This does not resemble in any way the chest and the deltoid of a human body. Also, if you lay this on top of a ham, which is, let's say this is 1/4 of our body, this area is this chest area. If you do this and you're like, oh, well, look, if I would flatten this and smooth this out, there is a surplus. So let's take this dart out because that makes sense. Well, it does, but it doesn't. Why? Because this is not a human body. This is just a ham. It's just a round cylinder. What the human body does is, it's as if you have this, well, you have a chest, which is this area, but then you have hollowness in between the chest and the deltoid, and then after that hollowness you have another round form. So you have two round forms next to each other. It's as if you put two hams next to one another. So when I put this jacket on top, what I should be doing is, hypothetically, put another round shape next to it, like so, and then say, okay, this is going to be the deltoid, that's going to be the chest, the empty area in between is going to be that line where the chest and the deltoid separate. And now I have to see what kind of shape I have to take out. And when you look at this, well, this does not resemble in any way those two darts that you see me take out or pretend to be taking out. So what do we do? Well, if you have understood dart theory, as I explained, we have a shape that starts from a certain roundness, then kind of like goes into nothing, where we have to take something out. So far, that's fine. But now it has to come back up and go over the deltoid. So it has to make, if you cut through, it has to make this movement and then this movement. This means that we can't just take a dart out that looks like this around the armhole, because that would just do one half of it. It would only cover up until this area. What we have to do here is, as if we take another dart out, which hypothetically, if it would go over the entire deltoid, is doing exactly the opposite. Because why? We have two round shapes next to each other with a hollowness in between. So if you take a dart out from whatever into zero this way, you also have to take a dart out from whatever into zero that way. You combine these two darts together and what you get is this shape. Okay? What does this do? This allows the jacket to go over the chest, go in, and then slightly come out to sit where it should sit. So, that's what we're going to do, and I hope that this makes sense to you. In order to do that, we need to know where roughly the deltoid is going to be. And to know that, we have to study the figure or the shape that we are going to cut our pattern for. Now, I have made this pattern. This is a pattern for myself so that I could use this on the videos and we could look at it. And so therefore, I know what anatomy I'm dealing with. If you're making this for a customer, Make sure you know the body of the customer. Don't just take darts out and say, well, I'm shaping this and whatever, because it may look okay, it may look nice, but there is always a better way, and you have to always strive for the better way. And the better way is the difficult way, not because we're trying to make our lives hard, but because you have to actively look for it and search for it and obsess with it. And well, obsessing about things takes time and energy. You're going to be drinking, cans of Coca-Cola, although I do not recommend that. But, you're going to tax your brains and, think. You have to think, and that's not going to be easy. It's always easier to just copy instructions of someone and just do it. But, if you really want to achieve something beyond what is achieved already, then that is not the way to move forward. Anyway, enough talking for me. Now, the base of the armhole is roughly about here. So my chest, if I would draw out with the, chalk, my chest is going to be roughly about here. Okay? And then we have here the top of the chest, or the nipple. And then from here on, we go into the shoulder, which is, trapezius is going to be here, neck point is going to be here, trapezius, and then we go into the deltoid, roughly about here. So my deltoid is somewhere along here. I'll just indicate that as a round form. So this is my deltoid area. Then we have my biceps and my triceps, and that's roughly the body. I'm not sure whether you can see it. I do hope that you can see it. So if I go around the roundest part of my body, this is the area that's going to dip in. So, and then from here on, it goes up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this dart by drawing it over this shape that I've been drawing it, just to indicate to you what I'm doing. So let's say my deltoid is here. This is the highest point of my deltoid, about here. And this is the highest point of my chest, which is the nipple area, and that's going to be about here. So I'm going to pretend that I'm creating, and of course the area in between them is, well, I should say here somewhere. Sorry for all this marking. I never mark it like this. I usually use a pen, but I have to make it visible in the video. So if we say that my chest dart goes from this point roughly, I don't want to go to this point, right? I'm just going to go in this area because we don't want to end up right on the chest point. So let's say I connect this area to the chest dart to harmonize the shape here. And I want to take out about 3/8. So I'm going to take that into nothing around there. So let's say I've been taking this out, and now I have to go over the other bump. All I have to do is to, well, roughly this, it could go higher and lower, but if I would want to connect this to here, I'll be doing something like this, and then I'll take this again from 0 and move it to there. So as you notice, what's going to happen is that this area is going to get narrower as we go towards the outer edges. So I'm not taking out just one massive piece and then going into 0. I'm going from 0 into something and into 0 again. Then that's the theory. Now what I would do now is to think about style and play around with the position of this dart, but maintaining the same principle. So I'm just going to go through that to do it correctly. These were explanations, and let's fast forward to the final result. Okay, so I hope it doesn't look too messy in the video, but I've done exactly what I explained to you, but just put it in the right place. And the idea is that you start from 0, you go into something, and then you go back to 0. Sometimes it isn't 0, it's a bit less, but you're not just taking X amount and then run that to 0. You're doing from nothing to something to nothing again. And that is going to allow the jacket to go over the chest, dip into that hollow area, and then come back out to go over the deltoid, because the armhole usually extends over into the deltoid and never just stops right in dip between the chest and the deltoid. If it does that, then you can just take something out and go into nothing. But if it's extending over the deltoid, over the chest into the deltoid, then it's always going to be nothing, something, nothing again, and not just nothing and something, or something and nothing, sorry. So, having done that, we now have to cut out these 2 darts. What do we do? Well, first of all, I have to extend this break line, and I do that by just making sure that my canvas is, laying there without any distortions or twists. And then what I would do is I would extend this so that we have our break line going from the top to the very bottom. After that, please place this like so, and place the other one on top. Now, we are doing 2 different sides, so one of them has a flat shoulder area, which is going to have all the shape in later, and this one already has the shape in. So you may think like, okay, what do I need to do with that? Well, it's very simple. We have other points that we can use as reference to match our panels. So match your first buttons, and this is why it's important to mark either with a pencil or a pen, because if it was chalk, it would just fade away, be too thick of a line, and you don't know exactly what you're doing. So get that in there. And then we have our lines here and our cut edge. So make sure you first match the center of the dart, because that's the one you've actually been mark stitching. The outer edges you've been cutting out later on, but you need to have the line that is the most accurate, which was your mark stitch. So if I would put a pin from the top and I would lift up, and this pin is right there, what I would do is I would now put a pin in here temporarily, just to anchor things down in place. And if this is slightly off on the edges, don't worry. The outer edges are not important. What is important is the position of your dart, first button, break line. And then put a pin through straight from the top into the apex of the dart, which is the tip of the dart. See if it comes out the same point. It does. So don't put the pin there. Just keep your finger there and put the dart somewhere, put the pin somewhere higher up so that you can cut this out. Once you've done that, you now are going to match your break line. So put one here, one in the middle, and then one higher up. So let's see if the middle one matches. If it doesn't, well, it exactly matches, so that's fine. And then the other one on the top. Let's see what that one is doing. And that one is slightly off, so we have to move this around to make them match without distorting our canvas. Slightly closer, so this has to move a bit forward. Just take the time to match them. So this is closer, and I think this should be right on top. Okay, fine. So now make sure that there are no distortions. I mean, we move this part forward, but we don't want to put a twist in the canvas. It should just be the same. Now, we have one pin here. We're going to take this out and just slightly put this lower to keep the points in the same place, but just leave this area so that we can cut it out. The rest is very simple. Sharpen your scissors, and sometimes people put their scissors on their heads and they try to sharpen it, which is the most ridiculous thing. The oils of your hair don't just go into the blades of the shear by just rubbing them against your hair. What you need to do is to rub your fingers against your scalp, take the oils out if you have any, and then just with your fingers go over the blades. Careful not to cut your fingers. Don't put the shears on your neck, man, or on your hair. What the hell is that? So make sure you cut these two out as sharp as you can and as precise as you can. So that's a souvenir. And this one we just cut straight into the waist up until there. Then we're gonna cut from here we can take the pins out, and it's time now to secure our darts, and we're going to do that by cutting out strips of lining on the straight grain, and then one of them is going to be folded on the edges and the other one is going to be flat. The flat one is going to be used to close the dart and to zigzag on top of it, and the one that's folded is only going to be sewn around the edges on the inside to cover this raw edge of the horsehair, which is now kind of like semi-covered with domette but can still poke through. So let's go on and do that. Now, and a small thing that I want to say about darts here is that sometimes you may make the dart different than what is on your forepart. Do not do that unless you have an extremely good reason. What that reason is, I don't know. I don't know what you're going to make, so I can't really comment on that. But what I'm trying to say is that this is the skeleton of your jacket. However, your jacket, which is your fabric, essentially, can't do one thing and then your canvas another thing. They have to be mirroring each other. So if you put a dart here, make sure that your dart is exactly the same dart as you put on your forepart. Sometimes people make the darts shorter or longer than the darts on the foreparts. If you want to optimize and really extract out the shape that you put into your canvas, make sure you just transfer the same dart on your forepart that you decided during the pattern making onto the canvas. If you make the dart of the canvas one way, the dart of the forepart one way, and then you start to do all the other manipulations, you still are going to do a lot of nice stuff and you're going to put shape into it. However, one thing will become difficult is to backtrack what exactly happened where and when. And what you want to know when you're dealing with complex garments at some point is that if something goes wrong, you can pinpoint it exactly to the core. If you have one dart that's different, the other dart is different, then you do manipulations on top of that difference. That's all going to give an effect, but when things go wrong, it's going to be difficult to say, oh, that's because the first dart was wrong. Well, no, maybe the second dart was wrong. Well, maybe the combination of them was wrong. Well, was it the combination of a good dart and a bad dart, or a bad dart and a bad dart, or a good dart and a good dart? So you can see how many possibilities there are to backtrack something, and well, make things easier and make sure that you have enough focus on everything that you're doing. So having said that, let's go to the machine and try to machine these darts closed.